Maurice Nicoll, Psychological Commentaries, Volume 2, based on his work with Gurdjieff, Bertlip, December 2nd, 1944. Further notes on deeper self-observation. We spoke recently about taking life as an end in itself and about the quite different work idea of taking life as a means to a different kind of end. We spoke about how the work has gradually to come between us and life in such a way that we begin to be able to, at certain moments, to see the difficulties we have in life through the ideas of the work. This at once changes our relationship to outer events, outer problems, outer difficulties. As was said, this takes a long time because as we're totally identified with the outer world, with people, with things, with happenings, with situations. In this sense, we're machines driven by life. For a long time, we cannot see how the work applies to our situation in life. We have nothing intervening. We have no kind of magic mirror or magic lens through which we look. We are, so to speak, naked in life, naked to life. We have no proper shoes to wear, no clothes. It has often been said that it is quite extraordinary what a change takes place in some typical life situation if we can bring the work up to the point of incoming impressions. It means that impressions, instead of falling directly on us, pass through the medium of the work. When we are awake, that is, when we are surrounded by the strength of the work and are conscious of what it teaches, then impressions of life are transformed. They have another meaning. It is not the external situation that we think about and react to, but the ideas of the work to which we react. Life does not fall directly on us, but passes through this medium of the work. And then life becomes a teacher to us through this medium of the work. When we are very much amongst life people, we can see quite plainly that they do not transform anything and that they also are taking life as an end in itself that is going to lead somewhere in the future of passing time. They really think that it is going to lead somewhere. Such people do not observe their inner states, nor do they see that nor do they see that the most important thing is change of inner state. The object of the work is to change our inner state so that we do not react mechanically to events. This requires a shifting to the point of consciousness, and this begins through self-observation. When this begins to take place, we dimly realize that it is not life that is the problem, but oneself. Then one no longer expects that in some distant future everything will be much better. One no longer leans on time expectantly. One becomes aware that as long as these different mechanical reactions, these different manifestations of chief feature, these intolerances, these rigid and unquestioned attitudes, these forms of grievance, these systems of making inner accounts, these habitual negative states, these unchallenged forms of imagination govern us. We cannot look towards the future to bring us to a better state. Realizing this, one begins to see that it means that one must not take life as an end in itself, but as a means to a quite different kind of end, which has to do with one's own level of being and all the states that arise from it. Have you ever thought that you might, in this fourth way work, be deliberately put into some external situation which is extraordinarily difficult in order to see whether you could pass through it without becoming hopelessly identified? Certainly, this would not be possible if you did not bring the work up to the point of incoming impressions and deal consciously with the situation by means of whatever you understand of the work ideas. Now, tonight I wish to speak to you about self-observation again, because without some practical and tested knowledge of what self-observation means, no one can do this work. We cannot do in life But we can do in this work to a certain extent if we feel it and know about it. And through doing the work, we may indirectly be able to do in life, but only indirectly. Remember that if we change ourselves even a little, we make room for others to change, even if we only change ourselves temporarily. If at some characteristic moment you to some extent remember yourself and so bring the work up between you and life, you will, according to your level of being, be doing the work. This will still have results for other people. It's only this indirect doing that is possible. But you must do the work because you yourself see the necessity of it, because you feel the need of it. You must never do the work to help other people. Now we come to the great and inexhaustible subject of self-observation. The object of self-observation is to get behind yourself, to become more internal to yourself. Now, the external part of you, the mechanical or even automatic part of you, is the lowest side of you in scale. When a person is very much identified with outside things, he is in the lowest part of himself, as it were, in the basement of the house of himself. Lowest corresponds to the most external. The moving parts of sinners are the lowest and most external parts of ourselves, and here live a great many small I's, which only understand a small and limited way. When we live in these I's, we are fast asleep in regards to the work. We become full of cares and anxieties of life, but behind these I's, that is more internal to them, are bigger I's. And again, behind them, still bigger I's, and so on until the influence of real I can begin to be felt. Some people always live too far in front of themselves, really outside of themselves, and cannot get into themselves because of the hypnotism exerted on them by small, outwardly turned eyes. If this goes far enough, something like hysteria can begin. Now, every act of attention, of concentration of the mind, tends to put us in a more internal position as regards to ourself. This one aspect of the meaning of self-observation. This is one aspect of the meaning of self-observation. Self-observation puts us behind ourselves. However, observing I may be very externally situated and, so to speak, may be one of these external eyes and nothing deeper. Then self-observation has no strength and cannot penetrate inwardly. When self-observation begins, the observing eye passes gradually inwards, that is, in the direction of real I, and as a result of the gradual penetration inwardly of observing I, it sees more and more because it gets behind more and more in ourselves. Now, the higher can only observe the lower. The lower cannot observe the higher. Or put differently, the inner can only observe the outer can never observe the inner. As we deepen our consciousness through observing I, we can see more and more what lies outside or external to observing I. The observing I cannot penetrate in this way more internally unless it is aided by emotional feeling. That is, if we do not think it worthwhile, we cannot really observe ourselves except very superficially. Catching a glimpse of oneself, however, may deepen the emotional valuation of the work on oneself through self-observation. For example, a person may see that he lies in a certain way when, according to his pictures of himself, he is quite certain he always speaks the truth. Such a sudden glimpse means temporarily that one has observed oneself from a deeper level. One has gotten behind oneself a little way. What happens after that depends on the quality of one's own sincerity with oneself and upon the valuation that one gives to the work. Practically always the tendency is to justify oneself. In that case, having caught a deeper glimpse of oneself, one will lose it in the uproar of self-justifying. We're told to observe self-justifying and not go with it. Certainly, you will be unable to stop mechanical self-justifying when you catch a glimpse of yourself, but that does not mean that you agree with your self-justifying. All self-justifying leads to no result in the work sense. To justify yourself means that you make things right to yourself. If you do not go with self-justifying, or let us say, if you only half go with it, half believe in it, you leave, as it were, a point in which you may grow and lead to another glimpse of yourself. This is like breaking through some crust that one takes as oneself. But if you justify yourself, this possible point of growth is at once arrested and turned the wrong way around. Remember, the more you find yourself justifying, the more you find yourself self-justifying, the more certain you may be that you are lying to yourself. The false personality, however, is very powerful and will maintain itself at all cost and by every method, one of which is self-justifying. The action then of self-justifying will be to prevent the observing eye from passing inwards. It will prevent you from seeing anything more deeply about yourself. It will keep observing eye on the surface as a sort of toy with which you play occasionally. You must understand that everything in us fights against real self-observation. Unless observing eye gathers round it other eyes that wish to work, that can hear something of the meaning of the work, it is without any strength. For this reason, if the significance of the work continually grows cold in you, observing eye will remain on the surface. It will remain ineffectual. The relationship between the power of observing eye and the evaluation of the work is thus made clear and is formulated in the diagram which concerns observing eye, work eyes, deputy steward, steward and real eye in vertical scale. To try to observe oneself not from the work side is useless. The observing eye, so to speak, must be surrounded by the feeling of the work for it to penetrate through the outer crust of personality. We are told that we must observe ourselves from what the work teaches. This is the only way, as far as we are concerned, in which observing eye can follow the path that is destined to follow, namely the path inwards. As was said, the effect of this passing inwards of the observing eye is that we gradually become aware of things that we knew nothing about because we were, so to speak, in front of these things so that they acted as if they were behind us. If the observing eye deepens, these things which we were unconscious because they lay behind us lie in front of us so that we can see them more clearly. You can only see a thing if it lies in front of you. You cannot see it if it lies behind you. How else do you think it would be possible to become more conscious of oneself except through a movement inwards of oneself? To become more conscious of oneself, it is necessary that the consciousness of observing eye must increase. The observing eye is a part of consciousness in us and not turned outwards via senses, but inwards towards our being. You can call it an organ of sense if you like, provided you say it is an organ of internal sense. The point of consciousness exists in everybody, but remains as a rule totally undeveloped. It remains undeveloped because it is not supported by the necessary knowledge, the necessary ideas, the necessary emotions. Life does not increase it. The work can increase it and is designed to do so. For this reason, observing eye must be supported by the work eyes, by eyes that feel the work and long for it. Simply to observe yourself without any deep feeling for the work can lead only to a very short distance. On the other hand, to feel or to think one feels the work deeply and not to observe oneself through it is again unlikely to lead us to any results. Certainly, great faith in the work may help, But self-observation is the initial method of this work, and so it has to be often thought about and considered and attempted. It may take a long time to begin to observe oneself from what the work teaches. That is to say, it may take a long time to make this connection between self-observation and the work. But if there is anything real, this connection will inevitably begin to be made after a time. And then self-observation is no longer some theoretical thing that one must try to do because one is told to do it, but because it becomes a constant accompaniment to one's life. It becomes something that does not interrupt, but accompanies. And when this accompaniment ceases, one instantly knows that one is asleep. Remember, that is said that self-observation must be uncritical. You do not observe yourself in order to criticize yourself. If you do it at will, at once, stop self-observation and lead to internal considering. When self-observation begins to accompany you, you will notice that it is not critical. It is simply a slight degree of consciousness. It is not a critical consciousness, a dredging consciousness, but an awareness. Through this awareness, you simply see more. You recognize, let us say, something that you said before, or you see that you are doing something that you did before, or that you're behaving like this or like that, or having these thoughts that you had before, or feelings that you had before. This awareness does not accuse you. It says nothing, but merely shows you what is going on in yourself. No doubt it may make you feel uneasy, but this uneasiness does not come from the observing eye. The work eyes behind observing eye may make you feel uneasy. Many other things could be said here, but the main point is to comprehend that self-observation must not be critical any more than a light that you flash over a dark room is critical of what it falls on. The object of self-observation is, as it is said in the work, is to let a ray of light into oneself. The next thing that is said is that when the light is let in this way, many things begin to change of themselves. It is the light of consciousness that begins to change things. For this reason, it is said in the work that the light will cure us. Have you ever thought what it means? This extraordinary phrase, the light will cure us? When I first heard it said by Gurdjieff, it had such an emotional effect on me that I was unable to speak to anybody for some time afterwards. I knew it meant something I had never understood and yet seemed to understand for the moment. We all think we can cure ourselves. I think perhaps I understood that we could not cure ourselves, but that there was something that could cure us if we could gradually reach it. The next thing I understood was much later. The next thing I understood much later was that no light could be in me unless at all costs I kept this work alive in myself. All the ideas, all the thoughts, all the memory of it. And this was my task. Because by doing this, I might be able to increase the light. And so instead of taking thought for myself, I had to take thought for the work. And everything else would follow at the right time. Then I understood better what it meant that we should not work for results. So our task is always to increase the light of the work in ourselves and to keep it alive amongst ourselves.